Greetings, salutations, respect, and love. I am Scott. You're in the Prog Corner. Today we're talking about the most divisive albums in the history of prog rock. We're not talking about controversial albums. We're talking about ones that actually divide opinion pretty squarely right down the middle. And the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is Tales from Topographic Oceans. So anyway, as you guys probably know, I troll Prog Archives and Progressive Ears and the Hoffman forums and they're, the Prog Rock subreddit. I'm all over the place looking for episode ideas, and on Prog Archives last week, somebody had started a thread about divisive albums, and a couple contributors actually came up with different mathematical equations, to figure out what's a divisive album based on the 1-star and the 5-star ratings. I don't know about any of that. I'm just going by my gut. And, we're not talking about controversial eras of a band's career or of prog in general. There's the old Phil Collins versus Peter Gabriel debate. You've got the Fish versus H debate. You've got the prog pop era of the 80s, the retro prog that's going on now. We're not talking about that. That can all be divisive, but we're talking about divisive albums. Certain bands are really divisive. King Crimson, Gentle Giant, Magma, Henry Cow, bands like that are a little more challenging. Not going to be talking about that. We're talking about divisive albums. So we're not talking about divisive genres either, like Zool or neo-prog or prog metal. And we're talking about prog. So Led Zeppelin 3, very much a divisive album. We're not talking about that. Kiss's The Elder, probably their most controversial and divisive album. Iron Maiden, Somewhere in Time, Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance, U2's Achtung Baby, Metallica's Black Album, Radiohead Kid A. These are albums that divided fans pretty evenly. So when I posted this on Twitter last night, asking folks for what they thought their most divisive prog album was in their opinion, I got a whole bunch of Tales from Topographic Oceans. I got a bunch of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and I got a few people talking about Dream Theater's The Astonishing. All really good picks, but I'm not going with any of them. These are my top 10 most divisive picks of all time, most divisive prog albums ever. And at number 10, this is courtesy of Naomi from 365 Days of Prog. She was on Rachel the Ghost's live stream a couple days ago and talking about how much she loves this album and how I absolutely tore it to pieces in my Camel rankings. It's Stationary Traveler from 1984. Their 10th album, their last on a major label. They got the big old boot from Decca after this came out. And I was challenged by Naomi to listen to this record again with fresh ears. It's all right. She loves it. And I know a lot of people absolutely adore this album. I do not, but it's better than I thought it was. So thank you, Naomi, for forcing me to listen to that. West Berlin is a really, really good song. And you're right, the title track is fantastic. But anyway, at number 9, I'm going with Genesis, Wind and Wuthering. And Genesis is a band, I know we talked about The Lamb. They're a band that you could probably pick quite a few different albums. I'm not going with like Abacab or Shapes or anything like that, because I don't know anybody that considers Abacab their favorite Genesis album. So I'm looking at those extremes. The Lamb, why didn't I put it on here? Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of people there's not a lot of people out there that think The Lamb's a bad album. I think a lot of people just think it's too long and maybe they want it down to a single disc. They want to edit it down. So my pick is Wind and Wuthering. And why is that? Well, I know a lot of people feel that Wind and Wuthering is their finest hour. I love it. I don't think it's their best album. It's a really, really good album, but I know some people that absolutely despise it. Some people are willing to give A Trick of the Tail a pass because Phil is singing so much like Peter Gabriel there. But once we get to Wind and Wuthering, I know a lot of people are done with Genesis. They can't take it anymore. So I got Wind and Wuthering at number 9. At number 8, It's Gentle Giant and Acquiring the Taste. I could have easily done the first album, but I really do feel the first two Gentle Giant albums are quite divisive. There are some people in the prog hive mind that feel the first two Gentle Giant albums were their best albums. I think they're among their least good albums, actually. And Acquiring the Taste is the one that a lot of people cite as their all-time favorite Gentle Giant albums. I actually have it real close to the bottom. So that is at number 8. At number 7, yeah, we talked about certain artists that are, divisive, and I can't think of one that's more divisive than Captain Beefheart, but I am including Trout, Mask, Replica on this list at number 7 because it holds such an esteemed place in the collective consciousness. A lot of people call this an absolute masterpiece, whereas some people view it as just a bunch of noise from him. I fall in the former group. I think it's absolutely amazing. I've been listening to this album for over 50 years, and I still haven't really figured it out. So yeah, at number 6, it's Asia and their debut album from 1982, the number 1 selling album of that year, and it just went on and sold millions and millions of copies. Why is it divisive? I don't think it's divisive because of the the way or the direction that the band was going. I think it was just divisive because people couldn't make up their mind if the music they were listening to was any good or not. I think it's a good album, but a lot of people hate it, and I absolutely get that. When you got, Carl Palmer, John Wetton, Steve Howe, and they, are recording top 40 stuff, it just kind of messed with your mind in 1982. So that's at number 6. At number 5, yeah, we talked about Tales from Topographic Oceans probably being the most divisive album in the history of prog. So I'm not going to include that in the ranking, but I am going to include a Yes album at number 5, and it's Drama, and I think you know why it is. There's a whole bunch of people, even to this day, that won't listen to Drama because John Anderson's not on it, Rick Wakeman's not on it, blah, blah, blah. It had the 2 guys from the Buggles on it. That's why I'm wearing my MTV shirt today. As you know, the very first video ever played on MTV was the Buggles, and after John and Rick quit, Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs joined Yes and came up with a phenomenal album called Drama. It's just great, but a lot of people won't even give it the time of day, and I know why, but they're dead wrong. At number 4, it's Steven Wilson. Yeah, The Future Bites was definitely one of those Marmite albums where some people really appreciated the crisp, clean production values that went into this pop album. Other people are like, oh my God, this doesn't sound anything like The Raven or Hand Cannot Erase. I'm kind of in the middle. I can see both sides on it. Luckily, it would appear that Steven Wilson is going back to a little more prog. That latest Porcupine Tree album was certainly prog, and there's rumors that his new solo album will be a little bit more in the prog rock camp, but The Future Bites certainly his most divisive album at number 3. Let's talk about King Crimson, and I almost went with Lizard. Absolutely could have gone with Lizard. It's a very divisive album. Even Robert Fripp didn't like it for years and years, but it had enough people supporting it over the years that I went with Islands because I felt for years and years this album got no love at all. I hated it for years and years. I liked Lizard the first time I heard it, probably because, John Anderson was on it, but Islands just went right over my head. I was expecting, something like In the Court of the Crimson King or In the Wake of Poseidon, and you get this thing. It's really weird with Boz Burrell. This is the only album that this lineup actually recorded, but I really do like it, and I absolutely understand people that do not, but they are wrong. They are 100% wrong. At number 2, it's Jethro Tull, and we could have done we could have done Under Wraps, but I'm doing a passion play. This is an album that, really sits in the shadow of its mighty predecessor, Thick as a Brick. It's structured similarly, where you've got basically one song cut across 2 sides of music, but people felt it was an inferior product than Thick as a Brick. People didn't like the soprano sax that Ian Anderson splattered this thing with. I like it. I think it's a cool diversion. I love it when bands go in different directions, and if you noticed, a lot of these albums on this list are albums that bands were trying something new, and half their fan base were like, yeah, this is great, and the other half were like, no, thank you. And A Passion Play certainly was that. In spite spite of it all, it hit #1 in the US, and I really do like it myself personally. But at #1, the most divisive album in the history of prog rock. Yeah, it's Pink Floyd's 12th album, The Final Cut from 1983. Yeah, you had absolutely zero involvement from Richard Wright. I guess Roger Waters kicked him out of the band. Nick Mason, I think, only shakes like a tambourine or something. He's got very minimal usage on this album. So this is basically a Roger Waters solo album with a little bit of help from David Gilmour, who was not supportive of this album. Apparently, he didn't like a lot of the material on it. And of course, Roger Waters clapped back, well, if you don't like the material on it, why didn't you supply some yourself? Yeah, I like this album, but coming hot on the heels of, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here in Animals, and then The Wall, and then you get this thing. Yeah, it is a bit of a letdown in terms of it doesn't have the kind of ambition that the 4 albums that came out before it had, but in its own quiet way, The Final Cut is actually a really, really good album. I like it a lot. Anyway, that's a wrap up of the 10 most divisive albums in the history of prog. I guess I'm one of the more divisive figures in prog right now. Here's a little comment that came up the other day. Man, this guy's annoying. Yeah, I guess I'm annoying, but, I don't care. I do what I do. Either watch me or don't watch me. You notice I never talk about, oh, hit that subscribe button. I don't do that stuff because I honestly do not care. I want you to watch my videos, but if you don't, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because I know the people that are watching my videos are the absolute best subscriber base in all of YouTube. I love you guys. Peace on earth. God save the king and free Tibet, y'all. I'll see you tomorrow.